up, guys? How's everyone doing? I hope everyone's been enjoying these lives. I've really been enjoying them. I'm going to go and share this on my Instagram. So just give me one sec. If you guys don't follow me on Instagram, it's just look up Sumner Healy, SumnerHealey. I've been getting a lot more active on there. It's just a cool way for me to kind of share the day to day of what's going on. I don't know why I can't find this link. So if you guys don't follow me there, come check me out. It's been a fun time. It's been growing a lot, so I'm going to share this with the folks on Instagram. And yeah, we're going to dive into it. So today we're going to be talking about the tools that you need in your business for a seven-figure land investing business. Okay, talk about the tools that we use. We've got a whole slew of discounts that we're going to share with you guys too. We've worked pretty hard, honestly, to broker a ton of discounts on all the platforms that are really essential to a land business. Now, some of this stuff is not going to be essential for where you guys are at. What I'm going to do is break down like, hey, when you're going to need this tool in your business. Frankly, in the beginning, there's just a few tools you need in your business. We keep that software stack pretty low. As you grow, though, expect to pay $2,500 to maybe $3,000 a month in just kind of your recurring software stack. It's going to be kind of a non-negotiable. So we're going to go through that. I'm just going to share this on Instagram. Just give me one sec, guys. So we're going to say, put this here, YouTube live. All right. The call yesterday was pretty fun. Hope you guys enjoyed that. I think that was pretty valuable. I want to put inside the chat here some of the tools that we're going to be talking about. So unfortunately, some of these people are just real bastards when it comes to creating discounts. One of the things that we do is we come and say, hey, we've got this group. We're going to use your platform en masse. We want to get discounted pricing. Not everyone's willing to work with us on that, but most of them are. So we're going to go through and touch on that. Sorry, guys. Just responding to a message on a YouTube live. All right. Let's dive into it. A couple housekeeping things. We are 51% of the way sold out for the event, which is freaking crazy. Yesterday we were at 40. We've already sold out 11% more of our tickets. I'll put that here on the chat. landinvestor.co/event, 51% of the way sold out. I'm fired up. We actually have our guest speaker call later today, kind of a group meeting with all the guest speakers, just going through some housekeeping stuff. And then we're going to go and dive into some like the content planning and whatnot later today. Also just signed on the dotted line yesterday for the venue. Super, super excited. So come join us. It's going to be a good time. Anyways, let's dive into it, guys. Let's talk about the tools that you need to run a seven-figure land investing business. Let's dive into it, right? No need to wait. Actually, one thing. I'll put it on the screen here. I just checked our stats too. We've got 6 spots remaining for the Leah market analysis platform. I'm going to put that down there. So we're like teetering on closing that out. 50 people closing the doors on it for the time being. Anyways, let's dive into it, guys. Okay, when you're first starting a land business, there's really only a few things that you need from like a software perspective. That's just a non-negotiable, okay? I always tell people a good baseline budget for a new land investor is about $10,000. Now, that's going to exclude the cost of education, okay? We're not talking education here. That can run the gamut, right? Sometimes education looks like mentoring someone and it's free. It just requires your time. Sometimes it means going through a course or paying for coaching or a mastermind. So like that cost can flex a ton. But let's just set that aside. Let's talk about the actual amount of capital that you need to get up and running. Now, if you're in a Leah or some other program, if they're doing a good job with education, it would be amazing to get a deal in 3 months. It's a good North Star. Worst case, you're going to get a deal in about 6 months. Like if you're doing the right things and you've got the right playbook, that's pretty typical, right? For me, when I started, when I was solo dolo, no education, it took me from July of 2019 until January to get my first deal. And I was giving it my all 24/7. So super, super long. We've got people that come into Leah that get their first deal in 4 weeks, 6 weeks. It just really depends on sometimes luck of the draw and also just how much action you're taking, how much marketing you're doing. I always think that like everything in this business and life in general takes so much more activity than most people realize. Okay. So the people that come in that are getting more reps in with market selection, they're pulling more markets, they're pricing more markets, they're mailing more. Those are typically the folks that get the first deal sooner than others. Anyways, even if we're looking at that 6-month window as a worst case scenario, we need that $10,000 to float us from now until then. And once we get that first deal, we can pay ourselves back and start playing with house's money, right? That's how I did it. I started with $7,000, got my first deal in about 6 months. I only made like $1,500, maybe $1,200 in that first deal, something like that. But I just kept on doing these little small baby deals. And that's how I built up my capital stack. And that's how I grew my business, right? I never brought in anything else besides that $7,000 in terms of outside capital. I just kind of kept on turning over the new money that I was getting. So the way that capital is going to be divvied up for a new land investor, obviously the vast majority of it's going to go to marketing, but you're going to need about $300 to $500 a month to float your software stack. And we're going to go talk about what that's actually comprised of, okay? So without further ado, let's go dive into the tools that you need to run a seven-figure land business. So first and foremost, you're going to need a platform that provides data, right? The backbone of what we do in this business is all data related. We need ownership data, and we also need a way to go and visualize our data, AKA map it, right? There's a lot of different tools out there that do this. The number one is really going to be DataTree. Just in terms of price point, it's the most accessible. It's also got, in my opinion, some of the cleanest data, and it's got a really good platform for running due diligence, right? We can map properties. We can look at 3D maps, 2D maps, flood zones. We can run comps. We can look at for sale listings. You can just do a lot of stuff in there. There's also a ton of like these bolt-on add-ons that you can add on top of it where you can get really, really deep. Like First American, who owns DataTree, they just have a boatload of really good data, okay? So with the Leah discounts, I think you can get your foot in the door for $90, $99. I think they changed the pricing. Back in the day, it was $49. You'll save, I don't know, 20 to 30% with the Leah discount. So the way it works is you're going to have that baseline monthly recurring cost, call it, let's say $100 in this case. That's going to give you a set amount of data every month, okay? So let's say it gives you 1,500 records that are included at that $99 or $100. And then everything in excess of that, they're going to charge you an a la carte pricing. And that's really where the cost adds up, right? So when you're first starting, you can get away with that low bracket. It's going to make a lot more sense, though, to secure a lower a la carte price because you're almost always going to exceed whatever that kind of baseline threshold is that they give you. So I think on our plan, we spend, I don't know, I think we get like $500 or $600 a month for our recurring. That gives us like, I can't remember, 5,000 free records, something like that. But we always go beyond that. And I think we spend about 3 cents per record beyond that. So most months we end up spending, I don't know, $1,000, maybe somewhere in that range, maybe a little bit less on data and our due diligence tools. So DataTree really just a non-negotiable. What I see a lot of people coming into this business is they try to go and skimp on data. And so I say, well, you know what? PropStream's $99 a month and I get 10,000 records. That's really cool. That's cool, right? That sounds really cool on paper. The problem is like the real expense in this business is not the cost of data. Data is pretty damn cheap actually in the grand scheme of things. The real expense is the marketing cost, right? So if you've got shitty data and you're spending your 52, 55, 60 cents, whatever it may be, to go and mail that data, and let's say you're going to do that quarterly, right? It's going to add up. And if you've got bad data, it's like, dude, it doesn't matter how good your marketing is or how much you spend there, you're screwed to begin with, right? I've used PropStream a lot. Like I tried to make it work in the beginning. What I found is typically these properties have sold a few months ago, a couple of years ago, depending on the county. There's a real latency to that data. So a lot of times you're just marketing to people that don't even own the property anymore. There's a lot of misinformation I found on there, like just like misrepresenting the property, wrong size, wrong address, weird shit like that. I've also just found that like the filtering tools are not very good on PropStream. So if I want to get really in the weeds and say, hey, show me people that have owned the property for 32 years that live out of county, that stack, and I can put all those filters on it. You can't really do that in PropStream. So DataTree's got better data. You got more filtering availability. You can filter that data better. And then you've also got that due diligence backend. So you don't have any due diligence features inside PropStream unless they've changed it. But when I was using it, I still had to have a DataTree subscription to go and run DD on these properties, even though I was trying to skimp and save money on data, right? The way where you should really try to save money is on the cost of mailing. Okay, that's where I'd want to cut corners and try to save some money. When it comes to the cost of data, don't cut corners. I'd recommend using DataTree. Now let's talk about mailing. Okay, inside the chat doobly-doo, you guys will see Rocket Print and Mail. So that's our mail house. That's what the vast majority of Leah members use. I've used so many different mail houses out there. When I first started, I was paying, I think like 70 some odd cents for a 2-page letter. What I found is Rocket Print Mail, because you buy in bulk and you secure, like you lock in prices, you can just get a better price than what I've ever seen elsewhere. Now, there's some problems, right? You have to pay upfront a portion of that total amount to go lock in a discounted price. It's usually a couple $1,000s. It's really not a big deal. If you plan on mailing, it's kind of a drop in the bucket. They have minimums, right? So if I want to go send out 12 letters, I can't do that. I have to save up to my minimum. I have to get to at least 500 letters before I can send out a campaign. Now, that doesn't have to be one campaign. You can put a couple different campaigns in one email, but if they're going to go fire up the printers for you, you need to have at least 500. So there's some problems there. You can't get super customized with, hey, I want handwritten robo font and I want this weird shaped letter. You can't get super, super tricky with it. But for your bread and butter, direct mail, 2-piece letter, blind offer, range offer, neutral letter, whatever the heck you're doing, you really can't beat it. I think we pay about 51 cents or 52 cents, I can't remember, for our 2-page letters. That's really good. They're also incredibly prompt. They've got great customer service. They're familiar with working with land investors. And so if you guys want to try to save money, don't do it on the data side. Do it on the direct mail side, okay? So Rocket Print Mail is where we save money. They also have some really cool reporting tools for tracking your campaigns and stuff like that. They're also just really prompt, right? So a lot of what we have to go through in this business is these huge latencies, okay? So I go and send out my letter to whatever mail house. It takes them 2 weeks to print it. Then they mail it out. It takes another 3 weeks. Then it takes another 2 weeks to start getting responses. Just so freaking slow. And so I need a mail house that's on the ball. A lot of these mail houses out there are really small. They've got 2 employees. They're making 50 grand a month. They just don't really have that level of support. Rocket Print Mail, I think they're multiple 8 figures at this point. They just got really good support. They're really fast. Now, it's not literally a software tool per se, but that ties into that data point, right? So when we're talking about data tree, that is related. Pay up for good data, save money on direct mail. Now, there is a time and place to go and use other direct mail companies. If we're doing neighbor letters or one-off purchase agreements to follow up with sellers, we're not going to use Rocket Print Mail. We'll use something like Click to Mail or mailing outside of Pebble. So there is a time and place to use something different, but never for the big volume mailers. Just don't do it. Save yourself the coin. As you scale up, and if you want to have a 7-figure land business, doing 150,000, 200,000, 300,000, 500,000 mailers a year is just kind of a non-negotiable. And so that 10-cent delta between Rocket Print Mail and someone else really starts to add up. It becomes really sizable. Okay, let's talk about so just one thing to note: data tree, non-negotiable. You need that when you're first starting, in my opinion. You really aren't in the game unless you've got great data and good due diligence tools. Let's talk about the next step. So as a new land investor, you are going to need a CRM. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts. So you got to have a data provider. You got to have a CRM. Whether you're at step 1 or step 100, those are always going to be essential in your business. As you guys know, we've kind of spearheaded this transition to Pebble for ourselves and for a lot of our Leah members. I was a big follow-up boss guy. In fact, we still have both in our business and still use both in our business. I'm not going to go on a super long diatribe about why one's better. Suffice to say, you need a CRM. Okay. I'll just give you the quick Spark Notes. Follow-up boss, better communication tools. Actually becomes more expensive than Pebble though, because you need so many different tools to kind of make it look like what Pebble does, right? Because Pebble's not just a CRM, it's also a database. And that becomes really important as you start having a lot of data. And there's just some better KPI tracking features. There's just a lot more that you get in there that we were having to use Trello and Follow-Up Boss and Google Sheets and all these things to try to get them to speak together to get the same result as what we get inside Pebble. Pebble's still young in the grand scheme of things. So it's there's definitely problems there, mainly on the communication side. It's there's just some issues there, right? And so I think they are improving, and they're really the only provider for land investors. And so I've kind of toyed with this idea for years about making the transition. I finally feel like it's in a place where it made sense. And so what we actually did is we kind of built out our own Leah variant of Pebble, because the truth is Pebble was really built kind of with the land geek ethos, right? Frankly, it was built for people that just are hobbyists, I guess. I don't know, that sounds mean, but it just wasn't really built for a big, high volume, big dollar land business from what I found. And so we came in and added our own flavor to it. And we call this kind of the Leah times Pebble build out. And so anyone that goes through that link in the chat, you guys will get kind of all of our pre-populated tool system structure in Pebble, which is pretty cool, right? Whether you're a Leah member or not. Because what I found is when it comes to staging and it comes to task lists and templates, there were some issues there. And so we went through and added that. We've been working with Pebble, both the founders, just giving our feedback to try to make it something that continues to get improved. And also they've done a really good job listening and taking feedback from us and from other land investors. And so I definitely think it's something that is evolving and continuing to grow. Now, whether you use Follow Up Boss or you use Pebble, you need something to track all of your leads. You also need something to track all of your data. So back in the day, we used Google Drive. We had this crazy Google Drive hierarchy. So we tracked our data there. And we had our CRM that went and tracked our leads. Pebble does a better job of that because it's going to put both those together. The other thing is the way Pebble is structured is if you think about most CRMs, it's the contact is the pinnacle, right? So the contact is the hierarchy. And Pebble, the property is the hierarchy. And then sellers and buyers sit underneath it. The weird thing about this business is it's two-sided, right? We've got acquisitions and we got dispositions. And so when we look at like our Follow Up Boss, for example, it just gets really messy because it's like so many duplications for the same property. So one property obviously is only going to have one seller lead, but it might have 300 buyer leads and it's all just discombobulated and weird. Inside Pebble, it's property and then everything sits nested underneath it, which becomes a lot more efficient for you and for your team. What I found is net at the end of the day, you're going to spend pretty much the same thing on all these CRMs. Like at the end of the day, they're all going to pencil to be pretty similar. Pebble will get cheaper as your team grows, where Follow Up Boss got a lot more expensive as our team grew. We were paying probably 3 times the price of what the top line Pebble plan is on Follow Up Boss for our team. And they charge you for these bolt-on add-ons and stuff like that for like phones and whatnot. They all have merit. There are some really cheap platforms out there like Zoho CRM. Like there's alternatives. You could even use a Google Drive or Google Sheet setup. I'm not a big believer of that. I mean, I think frankly, like spend the coin. I think it's kind of a non-negotiable to start keeping everything clean in your business from the beginning, right? If having a clean structure for your leads can eke out one additional deal a year, which is very conservative, it's probably one additional deal a quarter, it more than pays for itself, right? What happens is if you don't have this structure that's organized for where all of your leads are at in different stages, both dispo and acquisitions, shit gets missed. And that's lost opportunity, right? The number one killer of deals is time. And so if you're not timely with your follow-up and with your responses because stuff is misorganized or disorganized, that's just going to cause issues in your business, right? So just do yourself the favor from day one and get that, right? So we were looking at DataTree, we're looking at Pebble, 2 non-negotiables for new land investors. You can't avoid them. You need a CRM, you need a data provider, okay? All right, next one. We talked about Rocket Print Mail. We're going to skip past that. That's going to be a non-negotiable for new land investors as well, although it's not really a piece of software. But the reason I've added it here is it kind of plays out like a piece of software, because if I'm going to go and secure hypothetically 100,000 mailers, I might have to go and put a $5,000 deposit down. So it's going to kind of hit your cash flow like a piece of software because you're going to have this upfront cost, but it's going to lock in a much lower rate. Where a lot of platforms, there's no upfront cost. It's just mail whenever you have the mailers. The problem is you get screwed on pricing. So I add this in as a cost. Like I can see everyone's orders from Leah and Rocket Print and Mail. What I see is most new land investors that are kind of in that first, like getting their deal in 3 months or 6 months kind of arena. They're usually going to spend upfront like $1,200 to $2,500 to lock in a really good price on mailers. So it's going to hit their cash flow kind of like a piece of software, if that makes sense, right? So DataTree, Pebble, Rocket Print Mail, non-negotiables. Next, G Suite, okay? This sounds like a weird one. This is such a small, piddly little cost in your business to add on. A couple things I need to relay to you guys, okay? If you are running a business and you hit me up with a Gmail address or a Yahoo address or whatever, an MSN address, I instantly don't trust you, okay? Spend the time, go buy a domain, link it to your Google G Suite, and get a domain for your email, right? Sumner@landinvestor.co, Sumner@thelandpioneer.com. That's also going to make it a lot easier to organize your team's emails as your team grows. I can't be the only one that feels that way. I think for a seller, for a buyer, it's just a small, subtle hint of authority and trust, right? Oh, okay, they have a business associated with their email. I don't see that every day. It's probably legit. But if you're Sumner12345 landguy@gmail.com, I don't trust you, and sellers and buyers probably don't trust you, okay? So get G Suite. It's like $12 a month for the dome, or for the porting of the of the domain to the email. I believe, don't quote me on that, might actually be a little bit less. upgrade your Google Drive, right? Get like whatever it is, 10 trillion terabytes for storage there. You're going to need it. So G Suite is just a really, really simple thing to add in. We live and die by the G Suite tools. And every business that I run, G Suite somehow finds its way to be one of the most important tools in our business. I don't know how we would live without it, whether it's for the calendars, for Google Sheets, for Google Docs. Literally, Google has come in here and taken Microsoft's lunch from Excel, from Word doc, all that stuff, because frankly, it's a lot more expensive to get the licenses for that stuff. You get Google Meet, you just get a whole bunch of things that, like, when I look at our business, we are so integrated with the G Suite setup that it's just the cost is tiny compared to what you get. And it's also going to give you the ability to port over your domain to your email, which even if you don't have a website yet, you don't need a website. All you need is the domain. You need to go get your G Suite account, put them together. What I like to do in our business, so we have personal inboxes like Sumner at landinvestor.co, Ryland at landinvestor.co, Newman at landinvestor.co, and then we have global inboxes, okay? Like in our land business, a global inbox is going to be like buy at thelandpioneer.com, sell at thelandpioneer.com. And those global inboxes get routed to everyone that's under that division, right? So a general inbox for dispositions, boom, everyone on the dispo side can get exposure to those emails. And then they're also going to have their own personal email address as well. So this is kind of the setup that we like to use for email. I can also log into those global inboxes and see that stuff as well. We also, inside of our Gmail, we use labels, right? So we label any new incoming email, whether it's like a buyer lead, follow-up boss email, new sale email, whatever it may be. One of the things that I did last year that has quite literally changed my life, and that's not an exaggeration, is that we went and hired someone to go and manage my inbox, all my inboxes. You know what happened from like 2020 to 2021 is I went and started tracking my time, and the vast majority of my time was going to just answering emails. And a lot of them were just like, I noticed just the same response, like just very cookie cutter, right? Confirming receipt of an email from a title company, confirming receipt of a signed purchase agreement, just bullshit, frankly. And so what I did is I hired someone to go manage my inboxes. And for every inbox I have, those get managed. And anything that really needs my response, they tag it as Sumner's email. So when I come into my inbox, I just see these tags that says, hey, you have whatever, 600 unread emails, but there's really only 5 that you need to respond to. Changed my life. Now I spend 20 minutes a day on email opposed to 4 hours plus emailing like I used to. I think a lot of people get caught in that vicious loop of like this kind of false productivity where like you think you're being productive, you're just doing all this busy work, aka emailing people. It's redundant and not valuable. So like the organization tools inside Gmail are awesome. Okay. Essential, G Suite, Rocket Print Mail, Pebble, DataTree, New Land Investor, Big Land Investor. I don't care. You need all 4 of those tools. There's really no way to work around that. Next, number 5, you're going to need Sign Now or some kind of platform for signature. So we've used PandaDoc, we've used DocuSign, we've used all of them. I found Sign Now is the best. It's affordable. It's really customizable. You can do a lot of cool things on Sign Now. There's a lot of cool integrations with like Zapier and stuff. So one of the things that you can do is create a Google form and have that Google form. Let's say a buyer fills out that Google form. So we call that an intake form. Okay. Someone buys a property from us, an intake form gets sent to them. They fill it out. It's like, what name do you want on the deed? What address do you want on the deed? How do you want the vesting status? All that stuff. And you can create a Zap into Sign Now that goes and populates that into a purchase agreement, automated. And then boom, sends it out. So I think you could probably do a lot of that stuff on other signing platforms. I just found Sign Now makes it a lot easier. So I'm a big fan of Sign Now, and it's super, super affordable. One of like the cool little ninja follow-up tricks that we use as well, which works really well, is in Sign Now, you can set these like follow-up reminders for the document to where like a new document gets refreshed in the seller's inbox. Like, hey, seller, we sent it to them 5 days ago. They haven't opened to it. We can say, hey, send a new follow-up 5 days from now or 7 days from now. And that will go out. It's a really good way to nudge people very subtly. So we don't need to follow up with a text or an email and say, hey, Mr. Seller, do you want to sell now? I think, frankly, it's just kind of annoying. But we can just go populate that purchase agreement right back into their inbox and be top of mind. It works really, really well for us. Ryan, I'm going to go through the questions real quick. Ryan says, will it be recorded for those that can't attend? Yes, it's going to be recorded. I'm not sure if we're going to release it. We're definitely going to release it to Leah members for sure. Still TBD on what we're going to do with that content. Jeff says, I don't take anyone seriously that has a Gmail, Yahoo type email address for their business. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you're not alone in that. It's just, it's silly and it's so easy to fix. Okay. So sign now. These are the 5 tools. Again, we're going in this essential order of what you need. You need Sign Now, you need G Suite, you need Rockprint Mail, you need Pebble, you need DataTree. The next thing that you are going to need, maybe not in day 1 of your business, but like day 30 or 60 or 90, you probably are. Okay. You're going to need Zapier. Zapier has literally changed the face of the internet. I don't know why more people aren't just blown away at what Zapier has done. It's incredible. They allow us to duct tape together pretty much any tool and get them to speak together. Andrew, so Newman on my team, he's gotten pretty good at Zapier. He asked, did I hire someone to do it? So in essence, yes, I did hire Newman to do it, just kind of part of his role. There's definitely a learning curve. Like we weren't good at Zapier. He wasn't good at Zapier. We both recognize this is important. So he's gotten a little bit better at it. There are like agencies or people that you can find on Fiverr even that are just like Zapier experts. One of the things that I've thought about doing is super tangential. 2 things that are high on my mind. I want to hire a Zapier expert to come into both my business, all 3 of my businesses, and go and just be like, you could zap this, you could zap that, you could zap this, and then do it for me. I would frankly pay 5 figures for that. I think that would be really valuable. If someone could show me that they can shave off however many hours a week by automating the stuff with Zapier, I would pay insane amounts of money for that. If you're that person that knows how to do that, it's an incredible business. Like there's a great business to be had there in terms of being like an automation expert, right? And just coming to people's businesses, documenting, looking at their SOPs, looking at what they do day to day, and be like, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. I would pay a lot of money for that. I think a lot of other people would as well. So if you're that person, drop me an email, sumner@landinvestor.co. The other thing that I've been thinking about paying someone for, this is tangential, and frankly, I'm kind of embarrassed at how little I've used this or know about it, but it's ChatGPT. I want to bring someone into my business for a week or for a weekend or whatever it may be, and show me all the things that I could be doing on ChatGPT. I know there's so much that I could be doing that I'm not doing, and I don't really want to go and learn trial by fire. I want someone to hold my hand and show me, Sumner, for your businesses, this is how it would make the most sense. There's another great business for someone to go and take and run with there. Be the ChatGPT consultant for land investors or for course creators or whatever industry, and be the one that comes in and says, hey, I've worked with these other creators or this other people. This is usually the bottlenecks in this business. This is how we fix it with ChatGPT. You could literally systematize your deliverable to someone like me based off of just getting really familiar with a certain industry. Dude, if you could become that for land investors, I think it's a 7-figure business. I think you could literally charge 20, 25 grand per investor. There's definitely 200 investors out there that are doing 7 figures in their land business. Like that's your total addressable market. It's not huge, but you could go pretty quickly, go make 7 figures. I think it wouldn't be that difficult. So kind of a cool idea there. So Andrew, we use Zapier. Frankly, I still feel like there's a lot that we've just kind of left on the surface that we haven't really figured out. Like we do simple stuff, right? Person pays, zap into Slack, team gets notified, this happens, this happens, this happens. But I know there's some more impressive stuff that we could be doing there. I always tell people there's like 3 components to, I think, really any business, but especially land. Delegation, which we talk the heck out of. Like we always talk about that. That's kind of like my bread and butter, is hiring people and building teams. I frankly think that's probably the easiest thing to do in a land business because there's so much nuance with what we do. It's still hard to get AI or computers to fully understand the ins and outs of underwriting a deal or what have you, because there is nuance there. The next area, though, you could look at is like just eliminating, like just chopping shit out of your business. So, hey, I want to go build a big land business. I'm doing a lot of small deals and big deals. If you just remove the small deals and put your focus on the big deals, that's actually a lever for growth. Something as simple as just eliminating stuff that's not really making up that 80-20 balance in your business. And then the third area is automating. And I feel like I've done a poor job in terms of like really getting in the weeds with automating, but we've done just the bare necessities, the bare essentials. So Zapier, it's so cheap to add into your business. There's so many different ways to use it, but just like some of the basic stuff that you guys could do. New sale comes in, so someone places like a holding deposit or a down payment on your website. You could have Zapier trigger a notification into Slack to the right team members so they know, hey, ding, 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 now it's time for us to go and draft up X, Y, and Z or do X, Y, and Z. You can have information port into your CRM from Zapier. So like an example of that would have been, we were doing, I don't know how to explain this. We were doing some stuff with text responses and like call pickups and email opens that were giving us a signal for updating stage. Okay. I don't know if that makes sense. So we created these rules in our CRM that said, if X, Y, and Z happens with an email, a text, or a phone call, we want you based off of what happens to adjust the stage. Okay. Some of that could be done just naturally inside the CRM. Some of it couldn't. So we created zaps to say, when this happens, move the stage inside a follow-up bus, right? Like the example that we just gave with drafting contracts from an automated standpoint of having an intake form filled out and doing that into Sign Now, that's pretty straightforward. So stuff like that, right? That's like how we're using it, but I know there's a lot left on the table. So cheap to add though, just a no-brainer for you guys. The next is Slack. Slack you're not going to need in the beginning. Slack's not even like necessarily a line item for cost, so you can get it for free. We still use the free plan. If you're using the free plan, there's going to be limits on how far back you can go look at historic messages. It's not really a big issue for us. And even if you want to pay up, it's still pretty damn cheap. Discord is great for like communities. Like inside Leo, we use Discord. Slack is much more geared towards teams. Okay. I see so many land investors that have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 employees, whatever it may be, and they're communicating on like Facebook Messenger, or they're communicating via email or WhatsApp or text. No. You do not want to do that. What you can do inside Slack is we can create channels that are specific to certain tasks or to certain things, right? So we've got contracts to be sent channel, emails and documents that need review, acquisitions channel, end-of-day reports channel, partner payouts, photography updates, pricing updates, sales offers, subdivided properties. Like we've got all of these channels. And so information just gets organized, communication gets organized, which as your organization grows, it becomes really, really tricky to keep your kind of finger on the pulse of all these different things. And same thing for your team as well. So you can't do that in text channels. Maybe you could do that in WhatsApp. I think it's kind of a shitty way to do it. The other thing is that when I want to turn off, I just close out Slack. I see a lot of business owners that communicate with their team via text. In my opinion, it's a big no-no. You're kind of intertwining personal with business, and it's really hard for you to separate from that. I personally just don't like that. I also think as you start building out overseas teams, some of them have phone numbers that they can text on iMessage and stuff, but it just becomes a little bit weird. This literally works for everyone, regardless of where they're at. So I'm a big fan of Slack. The other thing is like we can keep conversations private as well. So we've got all of our channels. We've also got kind of private threads. So I've got threads with multiple people on my teams or what individual people on my teams where there's some stuff that I don't want the rest of the team to get bogged down with or to get exposed to. And so we can keep that communication private. The other thing is that like Slack usually just lends well to kind of quick communication. And I think that really builds camaraderie in your team, right? When you've got disparate teams that are spread all across the US or even international, you can start to really degrade the like level of connection and camaraderie. And frankly, Slack does not replace in-person connection or communication, but it's a pretty good stepping stone if you do have teams that are spread out. And so we just find like our teams are like laughing with each other and sharing memes and joking, and that stuff might not look productive, but I believe it has a real ROI. It keeps everyone engaged. The other thing is I'm not one to like install software on computers to like track my team's work. I track results, but I can also see just in Slack who's active. And I can also see based off of response times who's active, right? So I can see if their little notification is on for the fact that they're inside Slack. And if I go and send out a message, kind of the rule of thumb for us is we want a response no longer than an hour. If we're getting responses over an hour, I'm going to have some questions as to what the heck are you doing? You should never be so busy you can't get a Slack response out in an hour. So for me, it's like a very incognito tool for me to also track what my team is doing and if they're actually available. As you start hiring overseas, I've only had it happen once or twice, but you will get some bad actors that try to pull fast ones on you. This is a good way to catch that without being overbearing and installing tracking software on someone's computer, which I think just sets a weird relationship off the get-go of I don't trust you, right? Okay, speaking of teams that are international, we use Wise.com to process our payments. We've used so many different tools for processing payments. Wise.com is kind of the go-to standard for paying people in whatever currency you want to pay them in. Most of our team, even if they live overseas, want to get paid in US dollars, but some don't. And so we can have flexibility in terms of, hey, we're going to convert US dollars to Filipino pesos and go pay that out, or we can pay them in just straight US dollars. It happens really quick. The fees are super low. It's really easy to add people in there. And frankly, I think it's just a lot better than like a PayPal or something like that as well. So I'm a big fan of Wise. It goes straight into their bank account. The fees are super minimal. It's obviously you don't need to pay to get a subscription to it or anything, but you will pay a small processing fee for payment. So obviously it's proportional to the amount that's being sent. If it's from US dollars, I mean, you're talking about usually less than $1 in processing fees. If you're converting it into a different currency, it might be $4 or $5. It's really, really affordable. The other thing is that this allows us to have our team members do payroll for us. So I don't want to give people access to my bank accounts or what have you, but I can give people access to my Wise, which they could still do some terrible things in there if they really wanted to. So I'm very selective with who gets that information, but it's a way for them to pull money out of our bank accounts and push it to our team without them actually having direct access to our bank accounts. So I'm a big fan of Wise.com. I've used all sorts of different tools out there. It's just the most affordable. It's the fastest. It's the safest. It's kind of the gold standard for team payments. One thing that you will definitely want to eventually get off your plate is being the one to process that payroll, right? So for our overseas team, they go and submit on Friday their time card or the report card, depending on the role, if it's based off of pay for performance or pay for time. Then Saturday, those payments get processed. I used to do that. It's kind of annoying, but it takes like 30, 40 minutes on a Saturday. It's just not what you want to do on your Saturday. So I have someone on my team go and process those payments. And then for our US employees, we use, I can't remember the name of the payroll software, Gusto, and our bookkeeping team just processes that. Andrew says, on communication channels, I often hear you say speed to lead, i.e. getting an answer to a seller lead quickly and getting an offer out. Is there a KPI you have to measure that? Yeah, so we can see yes and no. So we can see inside follow-up. We'll talk about follow-up boss first. We can see inside follow-up boss, lead came in at 8:52 a.m. Text and email got sent out 2 minutes later. First call went out, 10 minutes later. So I can see all of that. So yeah, I mean, you're going to have, there's no, that I know of as it stands right now, I'll talk about kind of the asterisks on this, a tool that just tracks that for you. I'm sure maybe there's some phone systems that track that for you. Most don't. But what's cool is inside Pebble, that data is a lot more accessible. So one of the things that we've requested in terms of a KPI for them to track is all that information just lives there, is a speed to lead setup. I believe they've taken our feedback on that. We'll be adding that in. There is like some speed to lead metrics inside Follow Up Boss. If you go to the reporting section and you go to speed, there's under lead sources, there's a speed to lead setup. I found that it just doesn't always track correctly. So I don't know. I'm not in love with like the reporting that I get from this, frankly. I don't know why it gives us a lot of bunk data that's not super accurate. It's also going to take like a blended average as well. So a lot of times we just have our team go through and we'll go look at like the tip of the iceberg. We don't need to look at literally every single record for whatever period. But if I go look at, hey, all my acquisition members, I can go look at, let's say they had 100 leads in July. I can go look at 20 leads and get a pretty good pulse on where we're tracking, right? We always talk about 15 minutes is kind of the standard that we want to set. I've never been able to get under that consistently as like a blended average. We're always a bit over that, but that's certainly what we shoot for. And frankly, there's justifiable excuses for certain times where they can't do that, right? So it's something that we have to track manually. If that makes sense. And I don't go and, again, if we had 300 leads and each acquisition manager got 100 leads in last month, I don't go look at every single call record. I'm just going to go, we're going to go grab the tip of the iceberg. If someone is operating poorly, you'll usually see it, and even in a smaller sample size, if you don't look at all of their leads, and vice versa. If someone's operating well, the vast majority of their leads, they're going to be pretty prompt. For us, it's not so much that we like literally need to hit that 15-minute standard. Like if we're 16 minutes, I'm fuming. Not really the case. We just set the bar really high and then we overemphasize the importance of it. So everyone's always operating with like, shit, lead came in. Okay, I know my list of priorities is, hey, due diligence is important, but that speed to lead is more important. So we kind of set those priorities. But we literally aren't going to like be fuming if we don't hit that 15 minutes. It's really, really hard to hit as lead volume grows, unless you've got a big acquisition team. But we've just found it to be pretty tricky. Now, if we have stuff that's like literally sitting for days, okay, big problem. We rarely see that on our team. I mean, actually, I would say we never see that on our team. So yeah, we also look at too, like not just speed to lead for new leads, but I also want to go look at response times for leads in general. So like, okay, had a call with the lead, everything's groovy. I just had this happen this morning. We have a lead that we sent a purchase agreement to yesterday. Looks pretty good, right? Deal looks good. We send out the contract, and I go and see that the seller emails us at 7 a.m. One of my acquisition managers logged in like 7:15, and at 8:40, there still wasn't a response. So I also look at stuff like that in terms of once we're in the flow of conversations, speed to lead is still relevant. It's not as crucial. Once we kind of capture them and engage them, the pressure isn't on in the same capacity. But that is something that we've requested Pebble to track. And I'd like to see that for new leads. And I'd like to see that for old leads. And I'd like to see that broken down by communication channel. So I think part of the issues that we were running into inside Follow Up Boss for tracking this stuff is it literally tracks it for every communication channel, which is stupid. I'm like, we do an automated email and text when they first come in. So I know that's going to be good. I would like to break it down though and show me calls, then show me text if I want to look at it, show me emails if I want to look at it. So yeah, I don't that exists in some CRMs. I just haven't found that they do a good job with tracking it. Yeah, of course, Andrew. I can definitely be thorough. Sometimes I can be too thorough. Okay, the next tool that we use now, this is definitely not something that you're going to need as a brand new land investor. Frankly, I didn't get this for like 2 years in, but it's Land ID or MapRight. I love the name MapRight. I hate the name Land ID. I don't really know why they changed the name. And you might be saying, Sumner, well, why do you need DataTree and MapRight? Well, DataTree, frankly, that's going to be our data provider, and it'll be our due diligence tool. But if we want to look at what's a better platform for due diligence, it is MapRight. It's not essential in the beginning, but MapRight is bar none kind of the gold standard for mapping properties and having really good overlays on those maps. It's just better than DataTree, frankly, by a pretty large margin. It's not going to be a make or break in the beginning, but you eventually will need it. So at some point, you're going to need to add that into your business. One of the things that we found that's kind of interesting, there's a pretty big delta that I find with mapping on DataTree versus mapping on MapRight. Sometimes DataTree can pull up the wrong property, or MapRight pretty much always gets it right. So it's something to think about as well. As we start working in these more rural counties, I found that the mapping can be questionable, especially on DataTree. Land ID always delivers. So definitely not something you need in the beginning. Frankly, it is pricey, but I think as you scale up, it's definitely a worthwhile addition to your business. If you're like Rylan, you can just keep on milking the free trial. Rylan could definitely afford to have whatever plan he wants with them. He milks the free trial with them over and over and over again, which is pretty funny. Jeff, I've never used Partial Factor Regrid, to be honest. So I couldn't tell you because I've never played with them. I've heard Regrid is decent. I don't know about, what'd you say? Parcel Fact. I think that's a Land Academy platform. I don't know anything about Parcel Fact. I've never used it. I've never used Regrid, although I've heard it's okay. What I will say is, like, when we start looking at, and again, I could be wrong about these platforms having it, but when I look at like a DataTree versus a MapRight, okay, I can go look at like flood zones on DataTree, right? And I could go see what the FEMA flood map is. I can get some insight there. When you go and compare that to MapRight, the amount of additional details we can get just in flood zones alone is incredible. Or if I want to go look at like the soil type, these overlays are much stronger on MapRight, and I found them to be a lot more consistent with the mapping. I don't want to speak to Regrid or Parcel Facts. I've never used them. I think I could be wrong, but like, I don't really know of any big time land investors that do use them. It seems like every person eventually moves over to Land ID. I don't know. I could be wrong though. I've found that it's kind of like the gold standard in the land business. That or like Land Vision. I know a lot of people love the overlays and the mapping capabilities in Land Vision. So yeah. All right. Next on the list is PatLive. Not really a software. It's more of a service, but we're going to kind of treat it like it's part of our software stack. You don't need this in the beginning. I would say once you're getting up to doing, consistently 5,000 to 10,000 mailers a month, somewhere in that window, the kind of the caveat is how much time do you have to put forth to the land business? Are you retired and you can put 40 hours a week to the land business? Well, if you are, you could probably hold out on getting Pat Live. If you've got another job or another business, it just is in your best interest to get Pat Live pretty much as soon as possible. Now, again, I want to play with house's money. I'm not going to get Pat Live right off the bat. But once I have a couple deals under my belt, Pat Live is a no-brainer. That's going to be our answering service for all new seller leads that come in. No, Pat Live is not an acquisition manager. They're not going to negotiate deals. They're just going to go through a general script, fact find, do a little bit of pre-qualification, and then boom, that'll end up in your CRM, and then your acquisition team can take over. The truth is, those initial fact-finding calls just aren't very valuable in the grand scheme of things, but someone needs to take those calls, but they don't have to be a skilled salesperson or anything along those lines. Pat Live answers the phone 24/7, nights, weekends, doesn't matter. Holidays are always going to answer the phone. You can't pay an employee to do that. It's going to be very hard. You also just can't compete with their cost. You can get your foot in the door for less than $300 a month, and they're all US based. So there's like no language barriers. Like we get compliments all the time on how good our secretaries are, which is just Pat Live, right? For all the folks that use that link inside the chat, you guys can get access to our Leah script. Really, like what we found is there's like this sweet spot of like, okay, we don't want to ask too many questions because we get billed per minute. We don't want to ask so few questions that we don't have any insight on the property. So it's like this sweet spot. Our average call is about 4.5 minutes with Pat Live. Again, you can't hire an employee at the same rate to make this work. And that would be even factoring them being overseas. You're just not going to be able to get someone to work 24/7. A lot of people have tried to compete with Pat Live. No one's really done it. Frankly, I don't even know how they do it themselves. It's pretty incredible. So Pat Live, going to be an essential in your business. I would say somewhere between, okay, you've done at least a deal. You're doing between 5,000 and 10,000 mailers a month. And then the caveat is like, how much time do you have to put towards the business? Even if you've got 40 hours a week to put towards the business, again, taking those initial calls is so low value and like, it's just not worth your time. It also starts to mess up your mental. Like it starts to get in your head. When you've taken the 6th call of the day, we've been getting screamed and shouted at, pretty hard to keep that pep in your step and stay chipper. And so we got to protect our mindset and the health of our mindset at all costs. I don't want to be around that kind of energy. So I just delegate it to someone else. Sometimes these calls can run really long too. I'm really mindful about task switching in my business. If I'm working on something, I want to just work on that thing until I complete it. I don't want to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this. And what happens is when you're taking those calls, you have to switch tasks, and it takes a while for your kind of mindset to get back to the task that you were initially working on. So I personally don't like that. You're also at this kind of the mercy of these phone calls. So you're in this very reactive state where it's like you're out at dinner with your partner and you get a call and you got to take the call. Hate that. Did that for so long. It honestly made this business miserable for me. That subtle change, if you just look at the ROI in terms of like the happiness and the joy in your life, is just totally worth it, let alone the productivity. Next on the list is BrokerList. This is not necessarily a piece of software per se, but this is a flat fee MLS provider we use. We've used so many different tools out there for flat fee. BrokerList is the cheapest. They typically have the best access in terms of giving you almost access to all MLSs out there. The owner is a bit cuckoo. I will say you have to deal with some weird shenanigans. All said and done, though, it is totally worth it. Jeff, yes, Pat Live records every call. Yes, Pat Live records every call. I had to think about that. For some deals, it's going to make sense to go and use a broker. I think it almost always makes sense to go at least use the MLS, whether it's with a broker or flat fee. Pretty much for us, any deal over like a 15K, 20K list price is probably going to end up on the MLS, unless we're really optimizing for owner finance. Then probably not, because it's not really the demographic that we're going to get on the MLS. They happen, but more so we're going to get that on other platforms. But there's a lot of deals where like the math doesn't pencil to bring on a broker. And so paying $100 or $200, depending on the MLS, makes a lot of sense to get that same exposure for pennies on the dollar compared to paying out a commission, right? What we found is if you look at our stats last year, over a majority of our properties were sold in the MLS. And it's actually cheaper than land.com, landflip, and all these tools. So flat fee MLS access is a must-have, whether you're just getting started or you've done a bunch of deals. You got to have a good flat fee MLS provider. We can also list double closes on there and get a little bit creative. They're pretty flexible on some of that stuff. Number 12 is Direct Skip. So I know a lot of people here are probably not ready to start doing texting. There'll be a point in time where it makes a lot of sense to add texting to your business. You're going to need an acquisition manager and a texting manager to make that work. So if you're a solo operator, I wouldn't even think about it right now. But you're still probably going to need skip tracing. So direct skip, all folks that use the link in there get 500 free skip traces. Their rates, once you're beyond the 500 free skip traces, are pretty affordable. Process is really easy to use. We found that it's like a 96 to like 98% hit rate depending on the list. And we also are going to pull the information for relatives too. So it's like we'll get names, emails, phone numbers, and we'll get a bunch of them for one person, and then we'll also get it for relatives. And so we use this. Let's put texting aside. We use this a ton for trying to create easements for properties. So we'll go and skip trace the neighbors. For doing like neighbor offers, so going trying to dispo our deals to neighbors, we'll skip trace on there. A lot of times we'll get letters sent back to us where there's like no phone number, no email. Yeah, we could go and send a letter that's going to be slow, go and skip trace them. So we do a lot of skip tracing in our business, not in terms of quantity, but the frequency that we use it and the effectiveness is huge. I spent like my first 3 years in this business never skip tracing. The amount of deals that I lost out on because I got a letter, but there was no phone number or email on it, and I sent them back a letter that never responded to me was fucking crazy. It's a no-brainer, right? We just locked up a deal last week where we created an easement on the that'll probably net us 60K or so on that deal. And again, like skip trace, go create those easements or go figure out the value add strategy. Whether we had a Leah member, Candace, who she had this deal with a bunch of heirs, so she had to go skip trace all the heirs and go connect the dots and get this document signed. But she was able to go get a deal for 10 grand that's worth like 50 to 75 grand, right? So skip tracing is a cool way to go and unlock value in deals that otherwise would just be too difficult to do through the standard means. And so yeah, direct skip is awesome. That's a tool that I would be using in the beginning. Again, 500 free skip traces. It's really cheap beyond that because you're only going to be skip tracing a few records. We use it multiple times per week. And then once you start texting, then you're going to run all of your data tree data or land vision data or whatever it is through direct skip. You'll skip it, then you'll put it into your texting platform. So that leads to the next tool, and that's launch control. Okay. Going back to when to add texting to your business. Frankly, it's probably only going to be once you have an acquisition manager and you have a texting manager. It's too difficult to try to run the business and be the texting person and be the acquisition person and do all the things in your business. Okay. Texting in itself is a full-time job. You're going to generate a ton of leads. Speed to leads is important. You need someone on the front lines ready to call those leads and work those leads. Texting is super powerful, but it requires a ton of team members to make it work. It's frankly not as cheap as everyone makes it out to be. Okay. We end up getting a very similar cost for our texting to send out 30,000 texts. The cost looks very similar to sending out like 10,000 letters a month in our business. Like it's not free. Like some people are like, well, all I got to pay for is like the launch control. And it's like so cheap, man. It's like, no, there's way more to it, but it's powerful. The cool thing about launch control is we go and get our data. We text it first. We remove about 30% of that list because they respond. And so we shave off about 30% of our mailing cost by using launch control. So there's some really, really cool stuff that way. We also tap into a whole different demographic of sellers that otherwise we just don't seem to get through direct mail. So just like people in a different generation, different mindset, whatever. So yeah, you guys will see in the description and in the chat box up there, you'll see the launch control link. Again, if you guys have that team support, there's no better platform to use for texting. Launch control, in my opinion, is the safest platform for texting. There's inherently risk involved with texting. And so launch control puts like these guardrails that keep you as safe as possible. Now there's still risk, and some of that's going to be the cost of doing business. I've heard stories of people getting sued. Usually it's a couple $1,000s per text message, right? One of the things that we do in direct skip is we remove all of the known litigators. Okay. So that makes it a little bit safer. Like whatever you're doing, you need to make sure that you're removing known litigators as a bare minimum. It's just an easy thing to check off. But yeah, I love launch control. We generate a boatload of leads from it, a boatload of deals. Probably close to half our deals now come from texting, and launch control is the platform to use. So when the time is right, I definitely recommend jumping on the bandwagon. You just need the support to do it. Okay. And then last but not least, this is something that I haven't really talked much about with you guys. It's something that actually myself and a lot of Leah members are using pretty successfully. I don't know why I haven't talked more about this. Maybe we'll do like a full on video on this, But this is pretty freaking cool. So myself and a lot of Leah members have been using a platform called Fund and Grow. Okay. What they do is they go open up a bunch of 0% interest credit cards, and we can actually take that money and use it to fund deals. Of course, you could use it to fund your business and all that stuff, mailers, whatnot. But I think there's more of a real-time ROI by funding deals. So we use a platform called Plastic with a Q to get that money out of the credit card into escrow. So you can do it with title companies and wire it into escrow. You pay a 2.9% processing fee, and that's it, right? You also get credit card points on those purchases. And so you're going to get on the low end, maybe 25K, on the high end, maybe $250,000 of that 0% money. But you can just keep on turning that over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, multiple times a year. So it's actually really valuable. Like you can fill in a lot of holes in your business and do like at least a deal a month with it, maybe a couple deals a month. So like people like Michael Bull and Ryland and whatnot, they're doing a couple deals a month with Fund and Grow. One of the things I like to use it for too is transactional funding, right? So I'm going to double close. I need to go and pay the current owner, and then the new buyer is going to come and pay me. Some states you can't do pass-through funding, so I can go use that money at 2.9%. It's going to be a little more expensive than like a real transactional funder, but I can have that money floating out there longer. Transactional funders usually are going to charge 1.5% to 2% per day, right? So if, depending on the title company in the state, that sits there for a few days, that can actually add up. We're paying 2.9% whether it closes same day or closes a week from now. Again, you're also going to get those credit card points on it, which is awesome as well. Business credit isn't linked to your personal credit. So heaven forbid you can't pay it back. I mean, we're not in the business of trying to default on money owed, but you do have that as a safe exit. We got a freaking huge discount for Leah members on Fund and Grow, like massive, a couple $1,000s off. So typically I think it's $5,000 for the year. So it's like a renewing setup. So every year they'll go open new credit cards for you. So like you'll keep on building that base and you'll always be at 0%. So it's not like a one-time thing. It's like a forever thing. And you pay that subscription. So I'm gonna take my gum out. And so we got a pretty huge savings. One of the other things that they let us do is they said, if you guys can bring in like multiple people from your community, like 2 people, and they can split the cost, but get their own account. So we can even fractionalize that cost. So you guys can get the Leah discount, and you can come in with a partner, a friend, whatever it may be, another Leah member, and split that cost. And you'll get your own credit cards. It won't be linked, but you can split that cost by coming together and doing it as a partner and doing it together at the same time. So Fund and Grow is bad to the bone. I'm really into credit card points. It's a great way to rack up crazy amounts of credit card points. You're going to need an LLC. It's going to need to be seasoned for at least 3 months. You're going to need to have hopefully like no debt hanging in that LLC. So like if you have an LLC that's seasoned, but you've got like a shit ton of unpaid credit cards, that's going to make it really difficult, right? But what they do is they go and open these credit cards for you, a bunch of them. They go and negotiate the best kind of allowance with these banks. So the bank gives you 10K initially. They say, no, we want 20, and they go and fight for you, and they get it all done. And then we pair that with a platform called Plastic to wire the money out. Really, really cool setup. A lot of what we do when it comes to funding deals is not just one source. Like we're always patching together these little disparate funding strategies. So it's like, okay, I'll use hard money for this deal. I'll use the 0% credit card on this one. I'll use JV money on this deal. I'll do a promissory note here. I'll do this, do this, do this. And so we're kind of stacking all of these capital sources to get our funding needs. You know, we in our business spend 300 to 500K a month on new acquisitions. It's pretty hard for us to do that from one channel. So we have to like stack a bunch of alternatives. Andrew says, what would be a workflow for compiling all of my failed individual mailers and scraping up for a skip tracing follow-up campaign? I mean, I don't think there's any like exact answer here. So you're saying what would be the workflow for compiling all of my failed individual mailers? I mean, honestly, to do that manually is going to be a shit ton of work. I don't know if I would do that. Unless you have someone on your team. But think about it like this, Andrew, if I'm understanding the question correctly, you go and send out 10,000 mailers, maybe 50 people respond. So you've got 9,950 people that you have to go do manual follow-ups on. It's going to be insane. That I don't think that makes sense. I think the workflow makes more sense to say, I have this list of 10,000. I text it first. I remove 20% initially. I do 2 follow-up sequences in the text platform. So now I've removed 30 or 40%. So now there's 7,000 records left. And then you go and mail that. and then you work the leads that come in. I don't think it makes sense to do it the inverse, because mail gives us the tiniest amount of responses. It's the most qualified, but the tiniest amount of responses. So you're going to create so much work in your business by going after these people that you don't even know if are qualified, and doing this manual one-to-one follow-up just seems like way too much work. So it doesn't really make sense to me. I think I would say just don't do that. I would do text first, then mail. What I would do is for leads that go dark on you, right? So a lead that came in, lead goes dark, you can skip trace them and find their information, relatives information, different emails, different phone numbers. Like a lot of times we'll get a lead that comes in where we have a phone number but no email. Cool, go skip them. Get their email, their husband's email, their wife's email, whatever it may be, and then you can follow up with them and relatives, and we get deals that way. I also like it for trying to dispo deals to neighbors. So, okay, go skip trace the neighbor, go try to dispo to them. And sometimes that can even turn into an acquisition conversation where it's like, I don't want to buy it, but I do want to sell. And we'll do that for like easements, right? Landlocked property, go skip trace the neighbor, see if we can get an easement in place, things like that. But it would not make sense to do your follow-up to unresponded mailers. So he says, sorry, I'm driving, trying to send a coherent sentences, LOL. In Pebble, when you send the campaign mailer, I'll tell you like 96 of them sent, but there's 4% that didn't. Okay, so sorry, Andrew, I get what you're saying. You're saying, yeah, the ones that bounced because it's bad address or what have you. Probably the easiest thing there would be, I mean, God, that's an interesting one. I mean, the data could just be corrupt. I would say, here's what, if I had to guess, in that example of 4% that bounce back, probably only 50% of them are still alive or own the property or the data is good, right? So I would assume half of them are going to be just junk, right? So what I would do is, I don't think you could skip trace them, and that will give you a more accurate address if one does exist. It'll also give you the address of relatives. So I would skip trace that remaining 4%, export it out of Pebble, put it into direct skip and skip trace it. But I don't know if I would want to spend any mailing money on them. I think I would use like Twilio to go and drop them some text, or you could even text out of Pebble if you want manually, and go and try to text those people and just have a little quip. Hey, I tried sending you a letter, like the address got returned or the data was bad. Just wanted to see, do you still own the property, or are you interested in an offer? When we're thinking about these first touches, we want to think about what's the cheapest method to get in touch with someone. A text is going to be cheaper, right? I think a lot of that data is probably bouncing back because there's some level of corruption to it. Like the address is wrong. Something's wrong there. And so there probably are some people in that still own the property, that still are alive, that are good leads that you should get in contact with. But the majority of them, or close to the majority, probably aren't. They're dead. They're deceased. The address is wrong. They sold it to someone else, or like whatever it may be. Something's wrong there. So I wouldn't want to spend more mailing money on that. And you're also probably going to have to mail like relatives and stuff, which just gets weird and just gets complex. So I would rather do a cheaper method of communication, like a text, like an email. I wouldn't cold call. I think that's too much work for yourself. So that's what I would do. Frankly, I wouldn't really be too concerned about that missing 4%. I think if we're talking about trying to optimize things in your business, there's probably lower hanging fruit that's going to have a bigger ROI in your business than trying to go after that kind of 3%, 4% of bounce back addresses. I think it would be more effective to go and skip trace the people that had the no email, no phone number that reached out, or go and skip trace text people for, I just think like if we're going to be talking about skip tracing and doing extra work here, in my purview, I don't know if that little 4% kind of spread or whatever it is really going to be a needle mover. It's like, to me, it's like the tax delinquent argument, right? A lot of those tax delinquent properties are delinquent on taxes because the people are dead. A lot of times, like, that data is bad for a reason. So there's a reason it's getting pushed back typically. Just my 2 cents. I don't know if you guys agree with me on that. And you don't have to. I mean, and the good news is you could go and test this and try it out for very minimal cost. I mean, your first 500 skip traces are free. So it's like really no skin off your back to go and test it. I don't know if it's going to yield a bunch of juice for you in your business, though. But again, I could be wrong. It's not something that we do. So just because I do it doesn't mean it's not like a real thing, or valuable. So anyways, guys, I hope that was helpful. Yeah, I think that the stack of tools that you guys need aren't overly complex. When you're first starting out, you want DataTree, you want Pebble, you want to use Rocket Print Mail, you want to use G Suite, you want SignNow, you want Zapier, you want to use Wise.com for payments, Brokerless for flat fee MLS, direct skip for skip tracing, and then everything else you'll just kind of start to stack in as your business grows, and you'll typically know when it's time to add them in. Again, you should be floating as a new land investor a software stack between $200 to $500 a month, depending on the exact tools you're using and the plans that you're on. You shouldn't really need to be beyond that, right? So if we say, heaven forbid, you get your first deal in 6 months, hey, okay, you're going to be paying out at the top line $3,000 for your software stack over that 6-month period at $500 a month. That's like pretty high, honestly. And that remaining 7,000 gets to go to marketing. That's almost 15,000 mailers that you get to send out. Cool. We can make magic happen with that. And frankly, most people get their first deal if they're inside Leah well before 6 months. But it does happen. Things happen, right? Cookie crumbles that way sometimes. That's okay. So yeah, hope that was helpful, guys. Kind of a different topic. Usually I like getting a little more nitty gritty, but I was like, you know what? I don't think we've covered the foundational elements in terms of like what tools do most people need. Now, if you're inside Leah, I think you have a little more insight. But for folks that are just kind of floating around in our orbit, I want you guys to have awareness. Again, all of the discounted links will be in the description as well as in the chat. I don't know if you guys can see that. All of them are there. For any of the tools that we were able to get discounted pricing on, I'll share that. I shared that into the chat for y'all. And then final little note, the Leah Market Analysis Platform, our market selection tool, which has really, frankly, gotten rave reviews thus far. We're at 44 members. We're capping it at 50. We got 6 spots left. We just had someone take that 44th spot this morning. So yeah, it's been awesome. We've got some really cool stuff that we're releasing in terms of pricing, median price, low to high price. So it's going to help with your guys' pricing, as well as zip codes. The folks that are in at that first 50 are getting huge discounts on the zip code tracking that we're doing as well. So we're tracking all of the zip codes in the US, tracking sell-through rate, supply, all those statistics we always talk about, not only for counties, but also for zip codes. It's a huge undertaking. It's like 1.4 million pieces of data that we have to comb through in terms of like, okay, there's like 30 some odd thousand zip codes, and we track about 50 points per zip code. So yeah, it's been a really fun ride to go and build this out. We're releasing our roadmap here to members here shortly. So we're going to be releasing a roadmap, kind of showing you guys all of the things that we're adding and the timelines of when those are being added. It's just been awesome. It's been a really cool experience. This is something that just started as like an idea. If you guys saw the first 2 iterations of it, it was laughable. But we are releasing a course that's going to go along with it as well. So you guys are going to get access to a training program that's going to go along with it. I'm trying to twist Ryland's arm to also release his 7-figure pricing program. So we've been working on a 7-figure pricing program for a while now. Ryland used to be an engineer turned land investor, one of our early Leah members. The guy's a wizard at pricing. And I'm trying to get him to release this free of charge to the first 50 members. Now, I haven't been able to convince him yet, but I think it's going to be pretty cool. I'm a big believer in rewarding early adopters. So I reward this shit out of people. If they take a chance on me early and take a chance on something that we've created, they should be rewarded. So anyways, guys, appreciate you all making the time. Andrew says, going through all the text today really helped me address a lot of my business concerns. Thanks again. So grateful for the Leah group. Appreciate you, brother. Thank you for being here. I'll see you guys in the next one. Much love. Have a great day. Bye.